So, the official releases for JJK's Chapter 264 are officially out, which means I now have all the information I need to begin theorizing about what went down in this legendary chapter. See, Chapter 264 gave us a lot to talk about, and there's still more to talk about even outside of the confines of today's video. However, if we're being real with ourselves, the biggest talking point coming out of Chapter 264 by a long shot is Yuji's domain expansion. I've done this hand sign so many times since the leaks came out that I've gotten better at it, but it's still very difficult. Now, immediately after the leaks were released, everybody began flooding into my inbox and my comments, theorizing what Yuji's possible domain expansion could be. And this phenomenon wasn't only just happening in my inboxes and comments. Content creators on all platforms immediately began to theorize what Yuji's domain could possibly be. So, why did I wait so long? I mean, this video is not going out until Wednesday. That's the day the leaks come out, Nick. If you're not first, you're last on YouTube. Why are you taking so long? Well, because I don't think anyone's been right yet. See, the internet seems to be split in multiple different directions as it pertains to what Yuji's domain expansion could possibly be. Some people think Yuji is gonna teach Sukuna how to love on a train filled with the people that Sukuna killed. Some people think that Yuji is sacrificing himself in a battle against Sukuna so that he can end the cycle of curses. And others just think this train station is the weirdest looking boxing ring I've ever seen. See, I didn't want to rush into making a Yuji's domain expansion explained video because I wanted to collect all the evidence and information I possibly could. That kind of research takes a couple days. But now that I've had a couple of days to truly sit down with this manga, and specifically this chapter, I do genuinely believe I've cracked what Yuji's domain expansion is. And I'll tell you right now, it's not left, right, good night. Though, it is kind of close. See, in order to gather some knowledge for this video, I've had to dive into topics like research behind the Iwate Prefecture, studying Sukuna's lore as a Japanese folklore legend, and even researching what certain flowers mean in ancient Buddhist writings. Genuinely, when it comes down to it, this is the most research I've done for a video in a long time. But because of that, this is the most confident I've felt about a theory in a long time. Which is why today I present unto you Yuji's domain expansion explained. But before we get to explaining anything, guys, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. And if you're feeling particularly generous and want to see me bring anime challenges to the real life world, go ahead and follow my brand new project that I created with Stephen E., Chris Barnett, and Danny Mata called Anime IRL. Or if you want to hear me talk about anime and manga, go ahead and follow my anime podcast, Taku's Anonymous, where me and Danny Mata break down everything that happened in anime and manga this week. It's available on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. But before we get into our video today, I'd like to do a little bit of cleanup on our Chapter 264 breakdown video we released on Friday. And when I say a little bit of cleanup, I mean there's a couple of people that were yelling at me because
Angel's Jacob's ladder was weaker because Toto and Yuji were also being targeted by it.
Which, now that the official translations are out and we can no longer blame mistranslations, let's quickly read what was said in the beginning of Chapter 264 and why that point is not actually true. So let me go ahead and read page 2 of Chapter 264's official translation. In Akotsu's domain, Jacob's ladder's can't miss attack was focused to hit me as the target. This one affects Toto and the boy too. If I race up the Pillar of Light, I can reach Angel without anyone interfering. Moving on to page 3, Sukuna says, coexisting with a fully fleshed curse means depending on curse techniques. It leaves a sorcerer without physical reinforcement. Losing an arm made that difference obvious. Her output is less than last time. Now, upon reading that, what are your thoughts? Because let me tell you how I interpreted this. Sukuna's saying this Jacob's ladder is hitting everybody around him, which means if he scales up the Pillar of Light, people won't be able to follow after him because his endurance is higher than the boy's or Toto's. That's why he says, I can reach her without anyone interfering. The range and preciseness of Angel's Jacob's ladder has never once affected its strength, at least so far as we've been told. Sukuna then switches conversational topics and says that because Hana is dependent on Angel's curse techniques, that she has no physical reinforcement abilities. And on top of having no physical reinforcement abilities, she also lost an arm, which means she's even worse at defending herself. He then, for a second time, switches the conversational topic to her output is less than it was last time. Nowhere in this official translation does it say because both Toto and Yuji were being hit by this Jacob's ladder that its output was lessened. It also says nowhere in this official translation that because of the width of the Jacob's ladder was so incredible that its output was weakened.
Oh, but Nick, you know, if you limit a technique, it makes it stronger against the person who you limit it towards, right?
The Jacob's Ladder applied to Yuta's domain wasn't limited to only target Sukuna. It was limited to only target people listed as combatants, like in any domain. Gojo has the ability to bring people into his domain expansion without them being hit by unlimited void. There's no binding vow level of restriction here being made in order to make sure that Sukuna is the only person who can be hit with Jacob's Ladder inside of Yuta's domain. Or at least, not so far as we were told. Listen, I apologize if you don't like me calling out inconsistencies in the JJK manga, but being able to be an objective reader who looks beyond the scope of fandom bias is important in any kind of critical thinking or critical reading ability. I genuinely don't consider anybody a fan of anything unless they can acknowledge some things are wrong with the thing that they love. Because if you can only ever acknowledge the good things about the things that you love, then the level at which you love it is lesser than the people who can love something while also acknowledging there's some things wrong with it. It's called unconditional love versus conditional love. So yeah, Sukuna scaling up Jacob's Ladder pretty much unscathed was stupid. Am I happy with the result of this chapter? Absolutely, but that's still a dumb moment. Anyways, on to Yuji's domain expansion. Breaking down what Yuji's domain expansion could possibly be requires us to look at all of the information we concretely know about Yuji's domain expansion, of which the manga doesn't give us a huge amount. However, fortunately, because of internet sleuths, reverse image searching, and just general knowledge of the Japanese countryside, more information about Yuji's domain expansion has come to light in the last couple of days. More specifically, what's come to light is the train station in which Yuji seems to teleport him and Sukuna to. And that is a train station in Kitakami in the Iwate prefecture. Specifically Kitakami Eki, which Eki just means station, but that's the specific location. And with that one tiny bit of information, I was able to find a thread that I was able to pull at until eventually I came to the conclusion of what Yuji's domain expansion was. But I can't necessarily describe how Kitakami Eki comes into the equation until the end of this video. So let's go through the things that we know about Yuji's domain expansion chronologically as they appear in the story. As I'm sure many of you have heard by now, because this was the easiest bit of research to do revolving around Yuji's domain, Yuji's mudra, or his Buddhist hand sign, is that of Jizo, or Jizo Bosatsu. You probably also heard this mudra referred to as the Kasiti Garba. But just in case you haven't heard about this yet, let's quickly go over who Jizo is. See, Jizo is a bodhisattva, which is a kind of deity in the Buddhist religion. See, a bodhisattva is somebody who achieves enlightenment. However, they forego their enlightenment to help those in all realms achieve their enlightenment. Essentially, bodhisattvas are kind of like minor patron deities. There's many more bodhisattvas than there is Buddhas, and bodhisattvas exist in all realms of enlightenment. Now, Jizo is a very, very interesting and very on-brand bodhisattva. Conventionally, Jizo is known as the bodhisattva of children and travelers, which when you consider the fact that Yuji is a child who just teleported Sukuna to a train station is kind of on the nose. However, it goes a bit deeper than that, if you want it to. See, when it comes down to bodhisattvas, Jizo has one of the more noble missions. See, Jizo makes a promise with themselves to refuse enlightenment, to refuse ascension until they've freed all souls from all 6 realms. Well, at least all suffering souls. See, in Buddhism, there's 6 realms, and they work a bit like a building. You want to work your way up. On the top, there's the realm of heaven. Below that, there's the realm of humans. Below that, there's the realm of asuras, and asuras are kind of like devils in Buddhism. Below that, there's the realm of animals. Below that, there's the realm of hungry ghosts, and below that, there's the realm of hell. So as you work your way through the reincarnation cycle and descend through these realms, eventually you work your way, after many lifetimes, into the realm of heaven, assuming you've been a good person. And thus in Japan, if you ever see 6 statues of Jizo, that's supposed to represent Jizo raising suffering souls through all 6 realms. And Jizo is one of the oldest bodhisattvas in existence, as his tales of refusal to take enlightenment until all suffering in all 6 realms has been alleviated is so old there's actually stories of it in Sanskrit, which many of the foundational documents of Buddhism were written in, which is why he retains such large importance in modern day Buddhism, especially in Japan, where he's essentially seen as the patron deity of hell beings. And therefore, on top of being the bodhisattva of children and travelers, in Japan specifically, he's seen as the deity of deceased children and aborted fetuses, which makes Yuji using his mudra even more on the nose, as it was revealed to us 10 or so chapters ago that Yuji's father is the reincarnation reincarnation of Sukuna's consumed and lost twin. For those of you who don't remember, Sukuna had a twin in the womb with him, but Sukuna was so hungry because his mother wasn't eating that he ate his twin. However, since in the JJK universe, twins share cursed energy, much in the same way that Sukuna is in a reincarnation cycle, Sukuna's twin is also in a reincarnation cycle. And the latest reincarnation of Sukuna's consumed and therefore slightly aborted fetus of a twin brother was Yuji's father, Jin Itadori. And on top of this, as Yuji is one of the last surviving members of the Kusakabe coalition and has lost many child friends along the way, he in a way is holding on to all of their memories and is trying to keep their lives alive through the effort to kill Sukuna. And thus in that way, he's also a deity of sorts for deceased children. But the connections also genuinely don't end there if you don't want them to. Because outside of being the body stop of children, travelers, dead children, and aborted fetuses, if you look a little bit further into Jizo's backstory, you know that the motivation that Jizo had to forego his own enlightenment came from the fact that Jizo had a mother who committed a lot of sin in her lifetime. Ooh! Jizo is a woman. My bad. Kind of hard to tell when it's a bald 2,000-year-old bronze statue, but that's on me. Unless if you want to dive deeper into Jizo's backstory and the fact that she was trying to rectify the mistakes of her mother, and you consider the fact that Yuji's mother is literally Kenjaku, and Kenjaku is the person responsible essentially for the revival of Sukuna, then comparing Yuji to Jizo, a person actively trying to erase the mistakes of his mother Kenjaku in the form of Sukuna, becomes even more on the nose. And thus it seems as though Yuji won't accept anything in the form of an enlightenment in the Jujutsu Society until he's erased the sins of his mother. That is to say, until Yuji has cleansed the realm of hell. And in order to do that, you need to purify the King of Hell. Because the hand sign that Sukuna used to use to open Malevolent Shrine actually means the King of Hell. It's from a Buddhist figure known as Yama. And thus Jizo's role was to purify the souls of people like Yama and all suffering souls in all 6 realms. And therefore that responsibility has now fallen squarely on Yuji's shoulders. But alright, Nick, that hasn't really told us anything. Cool, we now know the backstory of Yuji's hand sign and see that it makes a whole lot of sense. That doesn't necessarily explain the domain expansion. And you're right. It doesn't. In fact, the mudras that certain characters use to open their domain expansions never really ties into what the domain expansion is. Like Sukuna's Ematonin, sure it means King of Hell, but his domain expansion slashes things. Yeah, it makes a big, scary shrine, but the shrine doesn't really do anything except for act as the center of the domain expansion. And therefore, usually the mudra being used to open the domain expansion usually just conferred to what the domain expansion looks like. Malevolent Shrine looks like hell. And therefore, Yuji's mudra, which is supposed to be the mudra of the patron deity of travelers and children, brings Sukuna and Yuji to a train station and turns them both into children.
But Nick, what do you mean by the children part?
Well, genuinely, one of the most perplexing things about this domain expansion was the fact that Sukuna wakes up inside of Yuji's body. And honestly, that was one of the key reasons that I'm just now making this video, because for days and days and days, I couldn't figure out why Sukuna was in Yuji's body. And that's until I started to think about who Jizo was supposed to be the representative deity of: children and travelers. But before we get into the child aspect, I want to get into the traveler aspect. See, because one of the most important realizations, something I never could have done on my own, mind you, that allowed me to build out an idea of how this domain might work was somebody one-for-one matching the manga panel where Yuji brings them to a train station with a train station in Japan. See, I believed, I guess rather naively, but also wasn't that well drawn, that because one of the tracks was listed as 10, which I now realize it wasn't listed as 10, that the train tracks that Yuji must have brought Sukuna to were Shibuya, as the Shibuya train station is one of the biggest train stations in Japan and therefore one of the really only opportunities where you'll see 10 tracks. But I was way off by like 1,000 miles, because instead of the Shibuya train station, the actual train station that Yuji brought him and Sukuna to by opening his domain expansion was Kitakami Eki, which is in a small town known as Kitakami in the Iwate prefecture. Now, the Iwate prefecture is nowheresville in Japan. It's not quite north enough to get the legendary snow that the northern part of the southern island and Hokkaido get, and it's not quite south enough to have anything even resembling the big cities that Japan is known for. And therefore, the Iwate prefecture is mostly known for its astounding natural beauty, its Buddhist temples, and farmland. But this doesn't mean that nothing good happens in Iwate prefecture, because after all, it's where Gege Akutami is from. See, Gege Akutami was born in Iwate prefecture in 1992. Yes, he's only 4 years older than me, but he moved to Sendai, which is in the Miyagi prefecture, south when he was in the 5th grade. However, some people have unfortunately been saying that Sukuna, Ryomen Sukuna, the real-life historical figure from Japan who was deified after his exploits and either turned into an incredible saint or a monstrous demon, depending on who you ask, came from the Iwate Prefecture. But he didn't. See, Ryomen Sukuna, at least the majority of his story exists in the Gifu Prefecture. Now, obviously, this depends on what iteration of his folklore you're reading, but according to the best well-kept folklore regarding Ryomen Sukuna, which comes from Nihon Shoki, Sukuna was the founding patron of 2 Buddhist temples in the Gifu Prefecture, which actually made him the person to introduce Buddhism to the Hida province, which is actually why Ryomen Sukuna, yes, that Ryomen Sukuna is worshipped in many old temples in the Hida and Mino provinces, all of which that exist in the Gifu Prefecture. Now, for those of you who aren't super studied up on the Japanese map, can't say I blame you, the Gifu Prefecture exists west of Tokyo. In fact, north-south-wise, it's almost directly in line with Tokyo, which, mind you, is where the battle between Sukuna and Yuji is currently playing out, in Shinjuku, to be exact. But then, Nick, if Sukuna's legend is from west of Tokyo, and this fight is taking place in Tokyo, why are we in Kitakami, which is 1,000 miles north from Tokyo and Gifu? Is it simply because Gege's from the Iwate Prefecture? No. Actually, it's not. Well, no. Technically, well, that probably does help. If we just wanted to go to a town in the Iwate Prefecture, we could have gone to Hanamaki, we could have gone to Oshu, we could have gone to Hiraizumi, or Kanagazaki. All of these towns in the Iwate Prefecture have Shinkansen, or bullet train stations. So why Kitakami? Well, that's because Kitakami, basically as long as it's existed, has been a halfway town. Kitakami, when it was originally founded, was one of the villages along the long journey to get to the northern parts of Japan. And thus, if you were making a journey from the southern or central parts of Japan to the northern parts of Japan, heading through Kitakami is something that most people would do. And this is why Kitakami translates directly in English to going north, and thus the train station that Yuji teleported them to with this domain expansion is very aptly in a town about going north. And to some of you, me simply saying going north is triggering a visceral and unpleasant reaction in your brain. And to others of you who have possibly suppressed those bad memories, you won't know what I'm talking about. But the idea of going north or going south has been a central talking point in JJK ever since Shibuya. More specifically, it's been a central talking point ever since Nanami's death. See, because in the lead up to Nanami's death, and really in the majority of Nanami's life, he centered his life around something that Mei told him, which was, if you want to remain the same person you are, move south. But if you want to become a new person and a better person, move north. Now, this is perfectly symbolized by Nanami's death, as Nanami's decision to stay in Shibuya until the bitter end and fight his way against transfigured humans and eventually Mahito was him going north. In fact, he's even talking about how he wants to go south in the preamble to his death, where he's talking about how he wants to live on a beach in Malaysia, which is geographically north of Tokyo. However, because of the memories of Haibara, a friend he lost when he was still in Jujutsu High, he decides to stick around in the battle and go north by dying, becoming a better and less selfish version of himself. Now, the direct foil to this is Mei, the person who told him this in the first place, because when the going gets tough in Shibuya, she jumps to Kuala Lumpur with her little brother, which is in Malaysia and geographically south. And thus she remains the same person for the entirety of the story, a money-focused, selfish woman. Now, technically, we don't learn until chapter 236, when Gojo dies, that Haibara is the reason that Nanami ends up going north. As Nanami says in this chapter, and I quote, "Without hesitation, I chose somewhere south. I'm such a backwards looking person, and yet I bet on the future in my final moment. It wasn't a bad one at all. I've also got Haibara to thank for that." At which point Haibara says, "You're welcome." However, the chapter of title 236 is rather interesting, because the title of chapter 236 is Going South, which seems to imply that Gojo in his final moments died the same person he'd always been, which is fair. Gojo's entire life he'd been the strongest, and he died before he even realized he wasn't. And thus in Gojo's final moments and in the afterlife, Gojo remained Gojo, while in Nanami's final moments he chose to do something that he standardly wouldn't do. And this is where Kitakami comes into play. See, rather interestingly, when both Yuji and Sukuna were teleported to this train station, only one of them changed. Well, both of them changed, but in differing capacities. See, the change that Yuji undergoes when he enters this domain expansion is that he's healed. His newly formed scars are gone, and he just has his old scars. That is to say that in essence, he returns to the form he was in prior to the final battle against Sukuna. He's returned to the person he was before the events of the last 100 or so chapters. And ironically, Sukuna has done the same. See, because there's more interesting things about Kitakami Eki than just the fact that its town's name is going north. Like I've already established, Kitakami Kitakami Eki is a Shinkansen train station, which means that one of the bullet trains that runs all across Japan runs through that station. However, the line the Kitakami services is a north-south line. And so far as we've seen the domain expansion up until this point, there's no trains pulled into the station quite yet. And thus, if the trains leaving this train station go north and south, and north historically in the JJK manga has referred to changing as a person, while south has referred to staying the same, wouldn't it make sense to you that the trains played into the domain expansion even a little bit? With the possible explanation of this being that those who are caught in this domain expansion, if they get in the train going south, remain the same person, but if they get in the train going north, they become a new and different person. Now, this north-south train analogy could technically be a thinly veiled way to talk about enlightenment, or the passing through of different realms in Buddhism. And therefore, an argument could be made, if you wanted to go through with this train analogy, that hypothetically, if Sukuna were to walk onto the north-heading train, or be forced onto the north-heading train, that he would have to undergo some kind of enlightenment. And therefore, there's a possibility that that north-heading train could be some sort of wind state for Yuji that would either purify Sukuna's soul or simply kill him. And that is a definitive possibility. However, there's also the southbound train, and there is the fact that Sukuna within this domain is currently trapped inside of Yuji's body once again. And thus, while the northern-bound train can offer some form of enlightenment or even possibly death, it's a possibility that the southern-bound train would keep Sukuna as the same person. But this same person is Sukuna trapped inside of Yuji. And thus, by opening this domain expansion, Yuji could be effectively offering Sukuna two choices: enlightenment and possibly death, or eternity trapped inside of Yuji. But this choice may not happen voluntarily. See, because while there may or may not be combat in this domain expansion, it's undeniable that prior to the opening of this domain, we got a flashback to Gojo explaining certain aspects of domain expansions from chapter 15, where Gojo highlighted that even though domain expansions use a bunch of cursed energy, they boost your stats and give you a guaranteed hit factor. Now, if hypothetically this domain just forced Sukuna to choose a train to board, neither of those things would be relevant, and thus I would reckon that both of those factors are going to come into play in the next couple of chapters. But how and why? Well, I'm assuming that Yuji is going to want Sukuna to get on one of the trains, whether it be south or north. And I'm assuming that whatever train Yuji wants Sukuna to get on, Sukuna's not going to want to get on. And thus, Yuji and Sukuna are going to rehash the battle they had when Yuji was trying to fight for control of his body in the first time he came face to face with Sukuna, inside of his own mind. Battle that led to the Enchain Binding Vow. However, because they're inside of Yuji's domain expansion and Sukuna can't open his domain expansion currently, Yuji is going to get something in the way of a Chimera Shadow Garden-esque 120% stat boost and the guaranteed hit factor of Dismantle, which rather interestingly would probably only apply every single time Yuji comes into contact with Sukuna. Otherwise, Sukuna would currently be being bombarded by Dismantle attacks left, right, and center. But rather interestingly, the deadly part of Dismantle when Yuji uses it on Sukuna is the fact that Yuji is targeting the barrier between Megami and Sukuna's souls. However, Megami's not in the equation, at least not visually. And thus we need to remind ourselves of what a domain expansion is in the first place. It's an expansion of your innate domain, which is essentially just your consciousness and your cursed energy. That is to say that Sukuna and Yuji's souls are currently touching. Well, ironically, Sukuna and Yuji's souls are touching inside of Sukuna, as Sukuna is Sukuna plus Yuji inside of Yuji's domain expansion. And thus, if in this domain expansion Yuji does use Dismantle against Sukuna, he would more likely than not be targeting the barrier between his soul and Sukuna's, without Megami even entering the equation. Which means there's a possibility if Yuji's able to separate his soul from Sukuna's and then place Sukuna's soul on the northbound train, that Sukuna could just actually be exorcised, as both Sukuna and Yuji combined getting on the northbound train would probably lead to both of their deaths, as both of them are products of the Sukuna reincarnation cycle, and not until their souls are completely divided from each other will that ever be different. And I have a strong feeling that it'll be in this domain expansion that their souls are forever divided. See, because Kitakami Eki wasn't just chosen because its name means going north. Kitakami Eki is also across the street from one of Japan's lesser known but more beautiful Buddhist temples, which resides on a hill overlooking Kitakami and a historical folk village. And while this Buddhist temple is gorgeous, for all the reasons that all Buddhist temples are gorgeous, what this Buddhist temple is known for specifically is its red spider lilies. In fact, in the season where red spider lilies grow, the entirety of this Buddhist temple is covered in them. Well, so much so that people from around the country come to this Buddhist temple to take photos of them. And while a lot of you who are Demon Slayer fans may know a thing or two about blue spider lilies, in Japan and in Buddhist writings, red spider lilies hold a massive amount of importance. See, it's said in legend that red spider lilies appear where people say their final goodbyes. That is to say that red spider lilies grow wherever people part for good. And in Buddhist writings, the red spider lily is a flower that guides souls through the cycle of rebirth. And for those of you who are saying, oh, Nick, that's a ridiculous stretch, Gege has used red spider lilies to convey this exact point before. In fact, to depict Mahito and Kenjaku's final moments together and their final goodbye, in Jujutsu Kaisen's Phantom Parade opening, we see Mahito awake in a field of red spider lilies and make eye contact with Kenjaku, symbolizing the moment that those two departed from each other forever. So this is absolutely something that Gege is aware of, and therefore, once again, red spider lilies will be used to denote the location where two people said their final goodbyes. This time around, the two people saying their final goodbyes will be Sukuna and Yuji. Will most likely be getting on trains, heading different directions. Because Yuji, who's supposed to be a living memory of Jizo, can't get on the northbound train. If the northbound train does truly represent enlightenment, Yuji can't get on it until all suffering souls have been freed from all 6 realms. And while getting rid of Sukuna would coincide with Jizo's wants of rectifying the wrongs of her mother, there's still too much suffering in the world for Yuji to accept enlightenment. And thus, not only is that how I believe the domain expansion will work, that's how I believe the fight will go down. But I'm curious to hear from you guys. Now that the chapter is coming out later tonight, how do you believe the domain expansion of Yuji is going to work? Tell me in the comments below, and while you guys are down there, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. Ooh, if I'm right, I'm gonna be insufferable.